All right, so you're ready to just totally crush that next job interview, right?
That's what we're here for.
To like really get down to the nitty-gritty
Yeah.
and figure out what works, without having to go through a ton of research, sift through all these articles and stuff.
Exactly.
We're doing that work for you.
We are.
So you can just relax and absorb all the good info.
Yeah. And today's deep dive, we're talking about mastering job interviews. We found this really great podcast episode. We'll give you the name later so you can check it out if you want. But basically, we're extracting all the best stuff from it, giving it all to you in a nice little package.
Think of it like a cheat sheet for nailing those interviews.
Yeah.
No more wondering what they're really looking for or how to answer those tricky questions.
Yeah. So what are we going to cover today?
Oh, man. So much good stuff. We're going to talk about how to make a killer first impression because, honestly, you don't get a do-over on that one.
Yep.
And then we'll break down how to tackle those common interview questions that, like, everyone always asks. You know the ones I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
But then we're going to take it a step further. We're going to even talk about basic MS Excel skills. Which, like, honestly, these days, who doesn't need those?
Right. I mean, it's so common to get an Excel question in an interview these days.
Seriously. And it's not even just for, like, data jobs or whatever.
Totally. Yeah.
And then, of course, we got to talk about how to deal with those awkward moments that always seem to pop up. Like when your mind goes blank or you spill water on yourself.
Or you accidentally call the interviewer mom.
Oh, God, please no. But yeah, stuff like that. And we're going to dig into the psychological side of interviews, too, because it's not just about what you say. It's about how you feel and project yourself.
Right, because feeling confident and prepared can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
So, are you ready to get started?
I am so ready. Let's dive in. So, first things first, that make or break first impression. The podcast we listened to, they actually gave us a little scene, to set the stage.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it helps to visualize it.
Totally. So they have this interviewer, her name's Prabha, and she's welcoming the candidate, Shiv. And, like, right away, you can tell that Shiv's on top of his game.
I'm intrigued. What does he do?
So Prabha, she starts off with the usual, good morning, welcome to ABC Corporation, please have a seat.
Standard stuff. Professional, polite.
Exactly. And Shiv, he's right there with her, says, good morning, thank you for having me here. But then Prabha, she asks, how are you today? And this is where Shiv's answer kind of sets him apart.
Okay, so what does he say?
He goes, I'm doing well, thank you. A little excited and nervous, but mostly excited.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
It's so smart. He's not trying to pretend he's not nervous because, let's be real, who isn't nervous in a job interview?
No one.
Right. But he turns it into a positive. He owns it, and he emphasizes his excitement.
Exactly. So he's being authentic and enthusiastic all at the same time. It's like this instant connection because he's relatable, but he's also eager.
It's such a subtle thing, but it makes a big difference.
Huge difference. So the takeaway here for everyone listening is to really nail that entrance. Be professional, make eye contact, smile, and when they ask how you are, think about framing it in a way that shows your genuine enthusiasm and a little bit of, relatable nerves.
Like Shiv did.
Exactly like Shiv did. Now, once you've made that killer first impression, you sat down, you're settled in, what's that first big question you always get hit with?
Oh, you know it's coming. It's the dreaded tell me about yourself.
Ugh, yes. The one that can make or break you in those first few minutes.
Seriously. But the good news is the podcast we listened to actually has this great example of how to handle it, like a perfect blueprint.
Really?
Yeah. They actually played Shiv's response, and it's seriously so good.
Let's hear it then.
All right, so he goes, sure, my name is Shiv Kumar. I have a background in marketing with a degree in business administration. Over the past 3 years, I have worked as a digital marketer, helping brands increase their online visibility. I specialize in SEO, social media marketing, and content strategy. In my free time, I enjoy reading business books and learning about AI trends.
Whoa. Okay, so he covers a lot of ground there.
He does, but he does it in a really structured and concise way.
I like that he starts with the basics, his name, his field, and then he gets into the specifics of his experience and skills.
Yeah, and that little bit about reading business books and AI trends, it's a subtle way of showing that he's passionate about the industry and staying up to date.
Right, and it doesn't sound like bragging or anything. It's just a nice little extra detail.
Exactly. And the interviewer, Prabha, she actually says in the podcast that it was a structured and confident introduction, so clearly she was impressed.
That's awesome. So for all of you out there prepping for interviews, here's the key.
Yeah.
Think about your own story. What are the absolute must-haves that you need to convey to the interviewer? Focus on your education, the experience that's most relevant to the job you're applying for, and then highlight those skills that are like directly from the job description.
Yes. Tailoring it to the specific job is so important.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And if you want to add a little personality, like Shiv did with the business books and AI stuff, go for it. But remember, keep it short, keep it sweet, and make sure it adds value to the overall picture.
Because remember, this isn't the time to tell your whole life story. You just want to give them enough to make them say, okay, tell me more.
Exactly. All right, so we've nailed the intro, we've aced the tell me about yourself. Now it's time for those more in-depth questions that really get into the meat of your experience and why you want this job.
Right. The questions that are designed to see if you're a good fit for the role and the company culture.
Exactly. And there are some classic ones that seem to pop up in every interview.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, why do you want to work for our company?
Ugh, that one. But in the podcast, Shiv totally knocked it out of the park with his answer. I was taking notes.
Me too. What did he say?
Okay, so Prabhas asks him, Shiv, why do you want to work for our company? And Shiv, he doesn't miss a beat. He says, I admire ABC Corporation for its innovative approach to marketing. Your recent campaign on sustainability particularly caught my attention. I'd be really excited to contribute my skills to projects with that kind of impact.
Ah, it's so good.
Right. It's so much better than just saying, oh, I think your company's great.
Yeah, generic answers like that, they just fall flat. You got to be specific and show that you've actually done your research.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what Shiv does. He mentions their innovative marketing, he brings up a specific campaign that he liked, and he ties it all back to his own values and what he wants to achieve.
It's like he's saying, I get you, I see what you're doing, and I want to be a part of it.
Yes. It's all about showing genuine interest and alignment with the company's mission and work. So, takeaway for our listeners. Do your homework.
Yes. Before any interview, take the time to really understand the company's work, their culture, their values. What are they known for? What are they doing that excites you?
And then, when they ask you why you want to work there, don't just give them a generic answer. Give them something specific, something that shows you've put in the effort and that you're not just there for a paycheck.
Because they can totally tell the difference.
Oh yeah, they can smell a fake answer a mile away.
100%. Okay, so what's the next big question we need to tackle?
Oh, this is a big one, and it always trips people up. What are your strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, that's the classic self-assessment under pressure.
Seriously.
Mm.
But let's see how Shiv handled it. So he says, one of my key strengths is my ability to adapt quickly to new challenges. I'm a fast learner, and I genuinely enjoy taking on new responsibilities. Okay, so far so good.
All right. Yeah, those are all great strengths to highlight, especially in today's fast-paced work environment.
Right, adaptability is like gold. But then he goes on to talk about his weaknesses, and he says, in terms of weaknesses, I sometimes find myself taking on too much work at once, but I'm actively working on improving my delegation skills.
See, that's how you do it. He's not afraid to admit a real weakness, but he frames it in a positive light.
Yes, he shows self-awareness, which is huge, and he doesn't just leave it at that. He talks about how he's actively working on improving, which shows that he's committed to growth.
It's all about showing that you're not perfect, but you're willing to learn and grow.
And you know what? The interviewer, Prabha, she actually says in the podcast, honest and balanced. That's what interviewers appreciate.
So true. They don't want to hear you pretend that you're some flawless superhero.
No way.
Yeah.
They want to see that you're a real person who can reflect on themselves and strive to get better. So, takeaway for our listeners. When you're thinking about your strengths and weaknesses, be honest, be specific, and show that you're on a path of continuous improvement.
Yeah, it makes you way more relatable and shows that you're actually invested in your own development.
All right, now the original podcast took a little turn that I thought was really interesting and super practical.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. They started talking about technical skills.
Yeah, specifically they focused on MS Excel. And you know what? I think this is something that people really underestimate in interviews.
Totally. I mean, it doesn't matter what field you're in these days. Knowing your way around Excel is pretty much essential.
Seriously. And it's not like you need to be a data scientist or anything. Just having a solid grasp of the basics can really give you an edge.
100%. So what kind of Excel questions did they cover in the podcast?
Well, Prabha, the interviewer, she threw out a few really common ones to Shiv. Like, first, she asked him, can you tell me how you would remove duplicate values in Excel?
Oh, that's a good one. It comes up all the time.
Right. And Shiv, he just calmly says, to remove duplicates in Excel, You would go to the Data tab and then select Remove Duplicates. Straight to the point, no hesitation.
So simple, but it shows he knows his way around.
Exactly. And then she hits him with another classic. What is the primary use of the VLOOKUP function?
Ah, VLOOKUP, the function that everyone pretends to understand but secretly Googles later.
Totally. But Shiv, he nails it. He explains VLOOKUP is primarily used to find a specific value within a large data set by referencing a unique identifier in a particular column.
Perfect. Clear and concise.
Exactly. And then she asks him, could you briefly explain the difference between the count and countif functions in Excel?
Ooh, good one.
Yeah.
That's testing his understanding of the nuances of Excel.
Right. And Shiv, he doesn't miss a beat. He clarifies, the count function only counts cells that contain numerical values, whereas the countif function counts all cells that are not empty, including text and numbers.
Boom. Nailed it. It's such a fundamental difference, but you'd be surprised how many people get it mixed up.
For real. And then the last Excel question she throws at him is, what are the basic steps involved in creating a pivot table in Excel?
Oh man, pivot tables. They can be intimidating if you're not familiar with them.
Totally, but Shiv breaks it down like it's nothing. He says, to create a pivot table, you would first select the data you want to analyze, then go to the Insert tab and click on Pivot Table. From there, you can customize the table by dragging and dropping fields into the row, column, value, and filter areas.
See, it's not rocket science when you know what you're doing.
Right. And the point here is that these aren't like advanced Excel skills. They're the fundamentals.
The building blocks.
Exactly. But so many people don't even have those down.
And it shows. So the takeaway here is brush up on your basic Excel skills before your next interview.
Seriously, it could be the difference between getting the job and getting passed over.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered making a great first impression, nailing those common interview questions, and even handling some basic technical questions. But there's one more thing we got to talk about. Those awkward moments that can happen in any interview.
Oh, yeah, because no matter how prepared you are, sometimes life just throws you a curveball.
Right. Like, remember that time I spilled coffee all over myself right before a big presentation?
Oh, yeah, classic. But the podcast actually gives a really relatable example of an awkward moment.
Really? What happens?
Okay, so picture this. Shiv's in the middle of the interview, and he needs a sip of water.
Totally normal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead of just like awkwardly grabbing the glass and chugging it down, he politely asks, "Excuse me, Miss Prabha, would it be all right if I had a glass of water?"
Smart move.
And Prabha, of course, she's totally cool with it. She says, "Of course, Shiv, here you are." And then Shiv, he actually breaks the fourth wall in the podcast and talks to the listeners, saying, asking for water during an interview is perfectly normal. Just be polite and professional about it.
See? It's not a big deal. It's a human need.
Right. Don't suffer in silence.
Exactly. If you need a sip of water, just politely ask. It shows that you're taking care of yourself. And honestly, it can even project a sense of composure. Like you're not letting a little thirst throw you off your game.
Exactly. And, you know, it's a good reminder that interviewers are human, too. They get it.
They've been there.
Right. They've probably spilled coffee on themselves at some point, too. Okay, now let's get a little deeper. Let's talk about the psychological side of job interviews because, let's be honest, it's not just about what you say. It's about how you feel and how you project yourself.
It's so true. The mental game is just as important as the actual answers you give.
100%. And Prabha, in the podcast, she brings up some really common experiences that I think a lot of people can relate to. She talks about stress, anxiety, self-doubt, and even imposter syndrome. You know that feeling where you're like, wait, why am I even here? I'm not qualified for this?
Oh, imposter syndrome is the worst. It can really sabotage you if you let it.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But Shiv, he offers some really great advice for dealing with all those negative feelings. He suggests if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by nerves, try some deep breathing exercises. Ensure you've prepared thoroughly, and take a moment to consciously remind yourself of your strengths and accomplishments.
Such good advice.
Right. And it's so simple, but so effective. Like, deep breathing is a classic for a reason. It helps to calm your nerves and center yourself. And being prepared. There's no better antidote to anxiety than knowing your stuff.
Totally. When you're confident in your knowledge and abilities, those negative thoughts just don't have as much power over you.
And reminding yourself of your past successes, that's huge for combating imposter syndrome. It's like, hey, wait a minute, I've done some pretty awesome things. Maybe I'm not a total fraud after all.
It's so important to give yourself credit for your accomplishments. We tend to focus on our mistakes and shortcomings, but it's crucial to celebrate our wins, too.
Absolutely. And, Prabha also emphasizes the importance of maintaining professionalism throughout the whole interview process, even when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Right, because even if you're freaking out on the inside, you want to project an image of calm and confidence.
Exactly. Your demeanor matters. So even if you're dealing with all those psychological hurdles, remember to stay professional, stay polite, and stay focused.
It's all part of the bigger picture.
Okay, so as the podcast wraps up, Prabha and Shiv, they give this really great summary of key takeaways and actionable tips. And I think it's the perfect way for us to wrap up our deep dive too.
Let's do it.
Okay, so tip number 1 from Prabha, dress professionally.
Yes, first impressions matter. Make sure your attire is appropriate for the industry and the company culture.
And tip number 2 from Shiv, be confident. Even if you're feeling nervous, try your best to project confidence in your skills and your potential.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. Now, tip number 3, back to Prabha. Practice answering common interview questions. We've talked about a bunch of them today, so you have a good starting point. And then tip number 4 from Shiv, do your research on the company. Remember how impressed Prabha was when Shiv mentioned their sustainability campaign?
Totally. It showed he was genuinely interested and had taken the time to learn about their work.
Exactly. Tip number 5, back to Prabha. Don't be afraid to ask questions during the interview. It shows that you're engaged and curious.
And it's a chance for you to learn more about the role and the company, too.
Absolutely. And finally, Shiv's last tip. Stay positive. View every interview as a learning experience, regardless of the outcome.
Love that, because even if you don't get the job, you can still walk away with valuable insights and practice for next time.
All right, so there you have it. A concentrated deep dive into the essential elements of mastering job interviews, all drawn directly from the Mastering Job Interviews, a Guide for Success podcast.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from that all-important first greeting to handling technical questions to navigating those awkward moments to managing the psychological pressures of the interview process.
And by understanding and applying these key insights, you are now significantly better prepared and more confident for your next job interview.
We believe in you.
So here's a final thought to really chew on. Which of the areas we discussed today resonates most strongly with you and your current interview prep? Is it that first impression? Is it those common interview questions? Is it brushing up on some technical skills? Or is it about managing your nerves and staying positive?
Whatever it is, think about one concrete action you can take today to strengthen your approach in that area.
Because that one small step could be the key to unlocking your next big career opportunity.
And we'll be here to cheer you on every step of the way.
So go out there and crush it.
You got this.